The message was only 3 words. Terra is dead. I was there when it arrived. My name is Astropath Transcendent Marius Kell, and I have served the Adeptus Astra Telepathica for 143 years. I have transmitted battle orders across sector-spanning war zones. I have received the dying screams of entire worlds as they burned beneath xenos' invasion. I have felt the psychic echo of exterminatus, the soul shriek of billions extinguished in nuclear fire. None of it prepared me for that moment. It came during Third Watch on the relay station Vigilance Eternal, a fortress monastery of consciousness orbiting the dead world of Carpathia Secundus. 217 astropaths maintained the great chain of communion that bound the segmentum obscurus to the wider Imperium. We were the synapses in humanity's vast nervous system, the whisperers in the dark who kept 1,000,000 worlds connected across the cosmic void. I was in the Chamber of Echoes when it happened, a spherical room where 73 of us sat in concentric rings, our eyeless faces turned toward the center, our minds open to the howling chaos of the immaterium. We were sorting through the usual cacophony, distress calls from mining colonies, status reports from battle groups, requisition orders for ammunition, requests for reinforcement, the endless bureaucratic murmur of empire. Then the Astronomicon went out. For 10,000 years, the Emperor's psychic beacon had blazed from Terra, a lighthouse in the warp storm, the singular fixed point by which every navigator in the galaxy plotted their course. Its light was more fundamental than gravity, more constant than the stars themselves. It was the axis upon which the Imperium turned. And in an instant, it simply ceased to be. The silence was total, absolute, a void where something infinite had been. I felt every astropath in the chamber lurch as if struck. Some began to weep blood from their hollow sockets. Others clutched their heads, their mouths opening in wordless screams. The warp itself seemed to convulse, reality rippling like disturbed water. And then, the message. It didn't come through proper channels. It wasn't routed through the relay protocols we'd used for millennia. It came as a psychic scream, transmitted with such desperate force that it bypassed every filter, every safeguard, every barrier we'd erected against the madness of the warp. It came from Terra itself, or what remained of it. I felt the mind of the sender, an astropath terminus of the Scholastica Psychana named Vera Holt. I knew her distantly, through the web of connection all astropaths share. She was strong, disciplined, one of the brightest voices in the Soul System choir. She was dying as she sent the message. I felt her terror, her disbelief, her absolute certainty. I felt the burning of her synapses as she forced every iota of her remaining life force into one final transmission, pushing it out into the warp with a strength born of pure desperation. 3 words, repeated in an endless psychic howl that would echo through the immaterium for months afterward. Terra is dead. Terra is dead. Terra is dead. And then she was gone, snuffed out like a candle flame. The Chamber of Echoes erupted into chaos. Some astropaths fell unconscious immediately, their minds unable to process what they'd received. Others began screaming, their voices harmonizing into a terrible chorus. 3 suffered catastrophic cerebral hemorrhaging and died where they sat, blood streaming from their noses and ears. I managed to stay conscious, though barely. My hands were shaking as I pulled myself from my throne and triggered the emergency klaxons. The sound was thin and distant compared to the psychic roar still echoing in my skull. The message was spreading. I could feel it rippling outward through the network of astropaths across the sector, then beyond. Like a stone dropped in a still pond, the psychic shockwave was expanding at the speed of thought, leaping from mind to mind, relay station to relay station, world to world. Within hours, every astropath in the segmentum obscurus knew. Within days, the entire galaxy would know. Terra, ancient Earth, cradle of mankind, throne world of the God Emperor, heart of the Imperium, was dead. And with it, everything we'd built for 10,000 years began to die as well. Lord Admiral Cassius Vane of Battlefleet Gothic received the news 37 minutes after the Astronomicon vanished. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, Righteous Indignation, a Retribution-class battleship that had served in the Gothic War and bore the scars to prove it. Around him, the command deck was descending into barely controlled panic. Navigator reports total loss of the Astronomicon, Lieutenant Graves shouted from the communications pit. All warp navigation is blind. Astropathic choir is in collapse, reported telepathica liaison Chen from her station. Multiple casualties. They're saying, she paused, her face draining of color. They're saying Terra is dead, sir. Vane had commanded void fleets for 60 years. He'd fought Orks, Chaos Raiders, and Tyranid Hive fleets. He'd ordered the deaths of millions and watched entire worlds burn. He was not a man prone to fear, but his hands gripped the railing of his command throne hard enough to hurt. "Get me confirmation," he said, his voice steady through sheer force of will. "Contact the astropathic relay at Cypramundi. I want independent verification." "Already tried, sir," Chen said quietly. "They're saying the same thing. The relays across 3 subsectors are reporting it. The psychic shockwave is spreading faster than we can track." Vane turned to his navigator, Master Stellarius, who had emerged from his sealed chamber at the base of the bridge tower. The navigator's third eye was uncovered, weeping luminous tears that stained his robes. He looked like he'd aged a century in the past hour. "Is it true?" Vane asked. Stellarius nodded slowly. "The Astronomicon is gone, Lord Admiral. In all my family's records spanning 8,000 years, there is no precedent. The Emperor's light has never failed. Not once. Not even dimmed." His voice cracked. "It is inconceivable, yet it has happened. Can you still navigate?" "After a fashion. We can use stellar cartography, dead reckoning, short warp jumps between known systems, but traversing the greater void?" He shook his head. "It would take months, perhaps years, to cross distances we once covered in weeks, and the risk of being lost in the warp." He trailed off, leaving the horror unspoken. Vane looked out at the viewport, where a dozen other ships of Battlefleet Gothic hung in formation around the staging point at Bacca. 200 vessels in total, the greatest concentration of Imperial firepower in the Segmentum Obscurus. And suddenly, they were all stranded. "Sir, incoming transmission from Battlefleet Command on Cypramundi," Lieutenant Graves called out. "It's Lord Admiral Cornelius, fleet-wide channel." "Put it through." The Vox crackled, and the aged voice of Lord Admiral Cornelius filled the bridge. He sounded exhausted, defeated in a way no enemy had ever managed. "All fleet elements, this is Battlefleet Command. We have confirmed reports from multiple sources across the sector. The Astronomicon has ceased function. Astropathic relays report that Terra has suffered a catastrophic event." A pause, heavy with the weight of history. "As of this moment, we have lost contact with the Sol system entirely. All routes toward the core systems are warp storm fouled." Silence on the bridge. Every officer stood frozen. Until further notice, all fleet elements are to maintain current positions and await instruction. Do not attempt long-range warp translation. Do not panic. The Emperor protects, even in darkness. Another pause. Cornelius out. The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, across the fleet, the reactions began. Some captains maintained iron discipline, keeping their crews at battle stations as if this were just another crisis to weather. Others saw immediate desertions as crew members fled to shuttles and escape pods, desperate to reach their home worlds before the galaxy tore itself apart. 3 ships, 2 frigates, and a light cruiser made immediate emergency warp jumps without navigator guidance, their captains panicking or mad with grief. One emerged 3 systems away, its hull fused with something that had never been meant to exist in real space. The other 2 were never heard from again. On the righteous indignation, Vane watched it all unfold with a growing sense of helplessness. He'd commanded fleets in battle, made life and death decisions for millions. But this, how did you fight when the axis of the galaxy had shattered? How did you maintain order when God was dead? On Necromunda, the news reached the Underhive before it reached the Spire. The gangers and factory workers deep in the bowels of the planet, those who lived in darkness and desperation, heard it first from the ravings of a mutant prophet who screamed it in the market squares of Dust Falls. The merchants laughed at first, then fell silent when the prophet combusted into green flame without anyone touching him, burning until nothing remained but ash and the echo of his words. "Terra is dead, Terra is dead, Terra is dead." The workers brought the news up through the hive levels, carrying it like a plague. By the time it reached the manufactorums of the mid-hive, production had already begun to slow. By the time it reached the spires where the noble houses dwelt in obscene luxury, The lower levels were already burning. Lord Helmar, planetary governor and absolute ruler of Necromunda, stood in his crystal observatory and watched the fires spread through the lower hive. They looked almost beautiful from this height, orange and red blossoms flowering in the darkness like some terrible garden. "How did this happen?" he whispered. His master of informants, a woman named Severina who'd served House Helmar for 40 years, stood at his side. "The astropaths, my lord. The message came through them and spread to their acolytes, then to the menial staff, then down into the general population. We couldn't contain it." "And it's true? Terra is actually... We've confirmed it through 5 independent sources, my lord. The Astronomicon is gone. Astropathic communication with the core systems has ceased entirely. Whatever happened, it was total." Helmar felt something break inside him. He'd ruled this world for 33 years, maintaining order through a careful balance of patronage, intimidation, and selective brutality. But all of that had rested on a single assumption, that Terra endured, that the Imperium was eternal, that behind all the chaos and violence of the galaxy there was a center that held. Now that center was gone. "The PDF?" he asked quietly. "Deserting in mass numbers. Most are trying to reach their families. Some units have turned their weapons on their officers. The Arbites are trying to maintain order, but..." She gestured toward the fires. "There aren't enough of them. The Guard regiments stationed here. The 47th Necromundan has barricaded themselves in their fortress barracks. They're not responding to any communications. The 83rd opened fire on a crowd of civilians attempting to raid their supply depot. 3,000 dead at least. 3,000. A month ago, that would have been a tragedy demanding investigation. Now it was just a number, barely worth noting against the scale of what was unfolding. "What are my options?" Helmar asked. Severina was silent for a long moment. "Limited, my lord. The hive is too large to control by force. 7 billion souls live in this city, most of them armed and desperate. If we attempt a crackdown, we'll trigger a full insurrection. If we do nothing," she gestured toward the fires again, "then we burn." "Yes, my lord." Helmar closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he could almost see it. Terra, the throne world, the heart of everything. He'd never been there, but he'd spent his entire life genuflecting toward it, sending tithes, obeying orders that originated from that distant golden throne. And now it was gone. "Send word to the noble houses," he said finally. "Tell them to fortify their holdings and prepare for siege. Activate all automated defense systems in the spire. And," he paused, "and send a message to the Adeptus Astartes. Tell them they have my authorization to use any means necessary to restore order." "My lord, that will mean..." "I know what it means," Helmar snapped. "Do it anyway." The Arbites received their authorization at 347 local time. By 0400, the executions had begun. In the market square of Hive Bottom, they hung every 10th person they could catch, hoping the example would restore order. Instead, it triggered a full riot. The crowds tore apart the Arbites' execution squads with their bare hands, beating them to death with the same chains they'd used to hang their victims. In the mid-hive, entire hab blocks declared themselves independent of Imperial authority. They barricaded the maglev stations and armed themselves with whatever they could find: stub guns, autoguns, industrial equipment turned into improvised weapons. In the upper hive, the noble houses turned on each other. Old rivalries, held in check by the threat of Imperial sanction, erupted into open warfare. House Catalyst launched an assault on House Grimes' holdings, using the chaos as cover for a generations-old grudge. The fighting spread, noble fighting noble, private armies clashing in the gilded corridors while the world burned beneath them. And in the underhive, where civilization had always been a polite fiction, the gangs went to war. Goliath against Escher, Van Saar against Orlok, Cawdor fanatics burning everything they could reach, while screaming prayers to the God Emperor they believed had abandoned them. In 72 hours, Necromunda, one of the Imperium's most productive hive worlds, descended into complete anarchy. And Necromunda was not alone. On Armageddon, the industrial workers rose up against the Adeptus Mechanicus overseers who'd worked them to death for generations. The factories stopped, the forges went cold. The endless production of munitions that had fed 3 major war zones simply ceased. On Cadia, noble, unbreakable Cadia, which had stood watch over the Eye of Terror for 10,000 years. The shock was perhaps greatest of all. The fortress world's entire purpose had been to serve as humanity's bulwark against chaos, to hold the line in the Emperor's name. When word spread that the Emperor's throne world had fallen, something broke in the Cadian spirit. The Khazar fortresses went into lockdown. Some regiments swore to fight on regardless. Others, seeing no purpose in defending a dead god's realm, simply walked away from their posts. A few, driven mad by the revelation, turned their weapons on themselves. And on distant Mordia, on Katakan, on Vostroya and Talarn and 1,000 other worlds, the pattern repeated. Some burned, some fractured, some fell into shocked paralysis. But everywhere, the same question echoed. If Terra is dead, what are we fighting for? Magos Dominus Hexamemnon 7 of Forge World Griffona 4 stood in the primary manufactorum and watched his world die. It started with the servitors. There were millions of them across Griffona 4, once human creatures lobotomized and augmented, their flesh merged with machine, their minds reduced to simple subroutines. They operated the assembly lines, maintained the reactor cores, performed the endless manual labor that kept the Forge world functioning. When the news came, when the astropaths broadcast the message of Terra's death, something impossible happened. The servitors stopped working. All of them, simultaneously, as if some switch in their cybernetic minds had been flipped. Then they began to weep. Hexamemnon 7 had witnessed many failures in his 300 years of service to the Omnissiah. Reactor failures, plasma containment breaches, cascade malfunctions in production systems. He'd seen servitors malfunction before, their simple minds breaking down, needing to be replaced or reprogrammed. But he'd never seen this. A servitor designated Worker Unit 47832, which had spent 60 years welding hull plates, stood at its station with tears streaming down the half-human face that remained. Its mechadendrites hung limp, its augmetic limbs trembling. God Emperor, dead, it whispered through a vox grill never meant for speech. Father, gone, impossible. Servitors didn't speak except for simple acknowledgments. They didn't feel. They were machines that happened to include biological components, nothing more. Yet across the manufactorum floor, hundreds of them were doing the same thing. Weeping, whispering. Some had fallen to their knees, their motor controls failing as something like grief overloaded their limited consciousness. Tech Priest, Hexamemnon 7 called to one of his subordinates. Run full diagnostic on Worker Unit 47832. I want to know what's causing this malfunction. The Tech Priest, a younger adept named Kellyan, only 50 years into his service, approached the servitor with his diagnostic equipment. His mechadendrites extended, interfacing with the servitor's neural ports. For a moment, Kellyan stood frozen. Then he stumbled back, his human eye wide with horror behind his augmetic sensors. Magos, he whispered. The servitor's higher brain functions, they're reactivating. The limbic system, the frontal cortex, areas that should have been completely suppressed by the lobotomy process, they're awakening. That's impossible. I know, but it's happening. And it's not just this one. Kellyan gestured toward the hundreds of servitors visible from their position. They're all doing it. The psychic shock of the message, it's somehow bypassing the neural suppressors. They're remembering. Hexamemnon 7 felt a cold dread settle into his organic components. If the servitors were remembering what had been done to them, what they'd lost, what they'd become, the screaming started a moment later. Worker Unit 47832 threw its head back and released a sound that should not have been possible from a vox grill, a howl of pure anguish that echoed through the manufactorum. Around it, other servitors joined in, a chorus of mechanical agony. Then the violence began. Some servitors simply collapsed, their reawakened minds unable to cope with the horror of their existence. They died where they stood, their hybrid hearts giving out. Others turned their tools on themselves, using their own augmetic limbs to tear themselves apart in desperate attempts to end their suffering. Still others, driven beyond reason, attacked anything nearby. Tech priests were torn apart by the very servitors they'd commanded. Assembly lines were destroyed, machines were smashed. Seal the manufactorum, Hexamemnon 7 ordered. Emergency lockdown now, but it was too late. The malfunction was spreading. Throughout Griffon 4, across hundreds of miles of industrial sprawl, the same scene was playing out. millions of servitors, all awakening simultaneously to the nightmare of their existence, all learning in the same instant that the God Emperor who'd blessed their transformation was dead. The Forge World's production ground to a halt. And Griffon 4 was not alone. On Mars itself, sacred Mars, seat of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the red planet where the cult of the machine god had originated, the crisis was even worse. The Fabricator General stood in the Olympus Mons Manufactorum and received reports of catastrophic failures across the planet. Servitors malfunctioning en masse, tech priests suffering religious crises, some magi declaring that if the Emperor was dead, then the Omnissiah's blessing had been withdrawn, others insisting it was a test of faith. The schism happened within hours. The reformist faction declared that the Adeptus Mechanicus must become independent, must forge its own path, now that the Treaty of Mars was void. The traditionalist faction called them heretics, insisted that the Omnissiah's will was eternal regardless of Terra's status. The fighting began in the Forge Temples and spread outward. Skitarii legions clashed with Skitarii legions. Titan legions, those god machines that had walked in the Emperor's name for millennia, were divided. Some princeps declared for reform, others remained loyal to tradition. On Ryza, on Styges VIII, on Metallica and Lucius and Agrippina, the pattern repeated. Some Forge worlds shut down entirely, paralyzed by crisis. Others erupted into civil war. A few, terrifyingly, declared complete independence and cut all ties with the Imperium. The Adeptus Mechanicus, which had supplied the Imperium's weapons, ships, and technology for 10,000 years, began to fracture. And without the Mechanicus, the Imperium's war machine started to run dry. Chapter Master Azrael of the Dark Angels received the message in the depths of the rock, the Dark Angels' mobile fortress monastery. He stood in the inner circle's sanctum, surrounded by the chapter's highest-ranking officers, and listened as the astropath librarian repeated what he'd received. Terra is dead. The Astronomicon has failed. The Emperor's light is extinguished. Silence in the sanctum. Then Brother Captain Belial spoke, his voice hard as ceramite. Impossible. The astropathic reports are confirmed across multiple sources, the librarian said quietly. Every relay station in the sector reports the same. I said impossible, Belial repeated. The Emperor cannot die. He is sustained by the Golden Throne, by the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers daily. He has endured for 10,000 years. This is either a mistake, a malfunction, or heresy. Master of the Deathwing Samael shook his head slowly. If it were false, we would have received immediate correction. The silence from Terra is telling. Then it's a test, Belial insisted. The Emperor tests our faith. Azrael had remained silent, his enhanced mind racing through possibilities. He'd led the Dark Angels for over 2 centuries. He'd fought enemies beyond counting. He'd kept secrets that would shatter lesser men. But this? What are your orders, Chapter Master? Samael asked. Azrael looked around the sanctum at the faces of his brothers. Warriors who'd been conditioned since childhood to serve, to obey, to venerate the Emperor as humanity's salvation. What did you tell such men when their god had fallen? We proceed as we always have, Azrael said finally. The Dark Angels have endured since the Horus Heresy. We've survived the destruction of Caliban, the loss of our Primarch, 10,000 years of secret warfare. We will survive this as well. And if Terra truly is lost, then we honor the Emperor's memory by continuing his work. We fight on. We protect humanity. We hunt the fallen. Nothing changes. But everything had changed, and Azrael knew it. In the days that followed, reports reached the rock from other Space Marine chapters across the galaxy, and the responses varied wildly. The Ultramarines, ever pragmatic, immediately began fortifying the realm of Ultramar. Chapter Master Calgar issued a proclamation declaring that Makraj would serve as a new center of Imperial authority if Terra was truly gone. Some saw this as wise leadership. Others whispered of empire building, of Guilliman's heirs positioning themselves to rule in the Emperor's absence. The Blood Angels retreated into religious seclusion. The Black Rage, which had haunted them since Sanguinius's death, intensified. Whole companies fell to visions of their Primarch's final moments, but now mixed with new horrors, images of the Golden Throne shattering, of the Emperor's withered form crumbling to dust. The Space Wolves howled their grief to the void and swore oaths of vengeance against whatever had destroyed Terra. They immediately launched raids toward the core systems, heedless of the danger, driven by fury and loss. The Imperial Fists, custodians of Terra itself, simply went silent. Their fortress monastery on Inwit ceased all external communication. No one knew if they'd fallen into despair, or were simply refusing to acknowledge a truth too terrible to accept. But some chapters' responses were more troubling. The Marines Malevolent declared that the Emperor's death freed them from restrictions on warfare. They began targeting civilian populations with a brutality that shocked even other Space Marines, claiming they were purifying humanity of weakness. The Sons of Gilliman chapter split entirely, half remaining loyal to Imperial ideals, half declaring independence and establishing their own realm in the Eastern Fringe. And there were reports, unconfirmed but persistent, of some chapters turning to the ruinous powers, of chaplains declaring that the Emperor had been weak, that chaos offered true immortality, that the long war had finally been won. On the battle barge Sword of Caliban, Brother Sergeant Nakir of the 3rd Company stood in the chapel and spoke with Brother Raphael, a newly elevated member of the Death Wing. "Do you believe it?" Raphael asked. "That the Emperor is truly dead?" Nakir was silent for a long moment. He'd fought for 140 years. He'd seen worlds burn and heroes fall. But this question struck at something deeper, the very foundation of his existence. "I believe Terra has fallen," he said finally. "Whether the Emperor lives or dies, that may be beyond our knowing. But the Imperium we served, the one with Terra as its heart, that is dead." "Then what do we fight for?" "Each other. Humanity, the innocent we're sworn to protect. Does it matter whether the Emperor sits on the Golden Throne if our purpose remains the same?" "It matters," Raphael said quietly. "Without the Emperor, we're just killers in power armor. Without the Imperium, we're just another gang of warlords carving up territory." "Then we make it matter," Nakir said. "We choose to be more than that." But across the galaxy, other Space Marines were making different choices. The cathedral erupted into chaos. Some sisters shouted support for Malivore, others for Viridian. Ancient loyalties fractured along theological fault lines that had been hidden for centuries. Did the Emperor truly exist as a god, or was he merely the most powerful psyker humanity had ever produced? If God, how could he die? If merely psyker, what did that make the Ecclesiarchy's claims? The schism of Ophelia began that day. Canoness Viridian led half the Order's militant away from Ophelia Sesephoth, declaring that true faith meant accepting hard truths. They would fight on for humanity, not for a dead god. Cardinal Commander Malivore declared her and her followers heretic, excommunicate, damned. He called for a crusade to destroy them. And across the Imperium, the pattern repeated. On shrine worlds, priests killed each other debating theological minutiae. Did the Emperor's death invalidate the Lectitio Divinitatis? Could there be faith without a living God? Some declared this a test of pure faith, to believe without proof. Others claimed the entire religion had been exposed as fraud. Billions of pilgrims who journeyed their entire lives toward Terra found themselves stranded, their life's purpose rendered meaningless. Some simply sat down and waited to die. Others turned violent, attacking those they blamed for the catastrophe, priests, nobles, anyone in authority. The Fratres militia, that vast irregular army of religious zealots, fractured into 100 competing factions. Some declared holy wars against perceived heretics. Others turned to flagellation and prophecy, declaring the end times had arrived. The cathedral worlds, Dimamar, Terra itself, San Lior, went dark, either destroyed in the same catastrophe that took Terra, or consumed by religious civil war. And perhaps most troublingly, alternative faiths began to spread. On some worlds, preachers declared that the Emperor had been a false god all along. They proclaimed worship of the machine god, or the four-armed emperor venerated by genestealer cults, or even more dangerous doctrines that the Inquisition would have immediately purged. Chaos cults, which had always lurked in the shadows, emerged into open worship. Why hide when there was no longer any emperor to fear? On the maiden world of Simhan, the Eldar seers watched the unfolding crisis through the skein of fate and saw terrible possibilities. The human empire's collapse would create a power vacuum that could consume half the galaxy. But more immediately, the psychic trauma of Terra's death was creating warp storms of unprecedented magnitude. The Mon-K anchored their souls to a single point, Farseer Kelmon observed. Now that point is gone, and they are adrift. Many will fall to She Who Thirsts or the other powers. Should we intervene? Asked another seer. To what end? Their empire was always doomed. We merely witness its death throes. But even the Eldar felt the repercussions. The Great Rift, that massive warp storm dividing the galaxy, grew more unstable. Daemon incursions increased across 100 sectors. Craft worlds that had drifted safely for millennia suddenly found themselves besieged. The galaxy was fracturing, and humanity's death scream was dragging everything else down with it. In the Strategium of Segmentum Command Obscurus, Lord Commander Militant Casimir surveyed the reports and felt history collapsing around him. He commanded 4,000 regiments of Imperial Guard, billions of soldiers spread across 500 war zones. Or he had commanded them. Now the chain of command was disintegrating in real time. Status report, he ordered. His chief of staff, General Morven, read from a data slate with a voice that grew more strained with each entry. The 14th Cadian has ceased all combat operations and is attempting to return to Cadia. The 8th Vostroya has mutinied against their officers, claiming they refused to fight for a dead emperor. The 101st Mordian. The 101st opened fire on Allied PDF forces when the PDF attempted to desert. 3 regiments on Morden 4 have declared themselves the Free Army of Morden and claim independence. And the ongoing campaigns. The Garvos Crusade has collapsed. Without reinforcement and resupply, our forces are being overrun. Preliminary reports indicate we've lost 17 worlds in the past 72 hours. Morven paused. The Macarian Reach defensive line has shattered. The Orks are advancing unopposed. Casimir closed his eyes. 17 worlds. Each one home to millions or billions of souls. Each one now being consumed by xenos or falling into anarchy. What about loyalist elements? Who's still following orders? The Krieg regiments continue to function. They don't seem to care that Terra has fallen. They just want to die for something. Morven's voice carried a note of black humor. The Katakan units are maintaining cohesion, mostly because their commanders are more terrifying than the news. But they're isolated, cut off. Without the Astronomicon, we can't coordinate fleet movements. Without functioning astropathic relays, we can't even communicate reliably. So what you're telling me, Casimir said slowly, is that the largest military force in human history has effectively ceased to exist as a unified entity. Yes, Lord Commander. Casimir stood and walked to the Strategium's main display, where a hololithic representation of the Segmentum Obscurus showed the locations of all Imperial Guard deployments. Even as he watched, markers began winking out, regiments going dark, either destroyed or simply refusing to report. What would you have me do? Morven asked quietly. It was the question that haunted every Imperial commander in that moment. The military existed to serve the Imperium, which served Terra, which housed the Emperor. That chain of authority had been absolute for 10,000 years. Now the chain was broken. Send orders to all loyalist elements, Casimir said finally. Tell them to consolidate positions, secure their local sectors, and maintain order by any means necessary. Tell them. He paused. Tell them the Emperor's work continues even in his absence. Tell them to hold the line. Against what, sir? Against everything. Against the xenos, against chaos, against the darkness that's coming. Casimir turned to face his chief of staff, and against ourselves if necessary. But holding the line proved impossible when the line was everywhere at once. On Talarn, the famed desert raiders, who'd fought the Iron Warriors to a standstill during the Horus Heresy, received word that their tithes to the Imperium were no longer required. The planetary governor had declared independence. The raiders' commander, General Khalid al-Zarqa, faced an impossible choice: obey the local authority or remain loyal to an Imperium that might no longer exist. He chose a third option. He led his regiments into the deep desert, away from both the governor's forces and the Imperial remnants. They would wait, he declared, until the situation became clear. They would not fight brother against brother. Thousands of other commanders made similar decisions. Rather than choose sides in a conflict they didn't understand, they simply withdrew. The result was a power vacuum across hundreds of sectors. On Valhalla, the Ice Warriors maintained their discipline and immediately moved to secure their home world against potential invasion. But without Imperial coordination, they ignored distress calls from neighboring systems. Let other worlds fend for themselves. Valhalla would endure. On Armageddon, the remaining Guard regiments faced a nightmarish scenario. The Orks, sensing weakness, launched a massive whack! Without Imperial reinforcement, without the ability to call for aid across the warp, Armageddon's defenders were alone. They fought anyway, because for some soldiers, the habit of duty ran deeper than faith. Inquisitor Lord Covenant of the Ordo Hereticus stood in the Chamber of Judgment beneath the fortress monastery on Scintilla and addressed the assembled Inquisitors of the Calixis sector. There were 37 of them, representatives of all three major Ordos, some of the most powerful individuals in the sector. Each commanded vast resources, armies, warships. Each could order the death of worlds. And each was now struggling with the same question. What was their purpose if Terra was dead? The Emperor's Inquisition was founded to protect humanity from threats both within and without, Covenant began. That mission does not end with Terra's fall. If anything, it becomes more vital. Inquisitor Varani of the Ordo Xenos stood. She was young by inquisitorial standards, barely a century old, but her record was impeccable. And who do we serve now, Lord Covenant? The Inquisition's authority derives from the Emperor's mandate. Without that mandate, the mandate is eternal, interrupted Inquisitor General Horst, ancient and scarred. We serve humanity, not a throne, not a planet. The work continues. Does it? This from Inquisitor Carda, Ordo Malleus, his voice edged with something dangerous. Or is this merely the last gasp of a dying order? The Imperium has fallen, brothers and sisters. Perhaps it's time we admitted that. Silence in the chamber. What are you suggesting? Covenant asked carefully. Cardi stood, his black armor gleaming. I'm suggesting we stop pretending. The Emperor is dead. Terra is gone. The Imperium, that bloated, corrupt edifice we've propped up for millennia, is collapsing. Perhaps that's not a tragedy. Perhaps it's an opportunity. To do what? To rebuild, to create something better from the ashes. We have the resources, the knowledge, the will. Why should we cling to the corpse of a failed empire when we could forge something new? That's heresy, Varani said flatly. Heresy against what? Cardi shot back. Against a dead god? Against laws written by men who've been dust for 10,000 years? Wake up, Varani. The Imperium is dead. We can either die with it or evolve. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some Inquisitors supported Carde's position, that the Inquisition should become independent, perhaps even the foundation of a new order. Others considered such talk treason of the highest order. Lord Covenant watched it all with growing dread. If the Inquisition fractured, if the organization tasked with maintaining unity became divided against itself, then there was truly no hope. Enough, he said finally, his voice cutting through the argument. We will not resolve this debate today, but I will say this. The Inquisition has survived the Horus Heresy, the Age of Apostasy, the Reign of Blood, and 10,000 years of constant warfare. We will survive this as well. Each of you will return to your domains and maintain order. We will reconvene in 6 months to assess the situation. And if there is no situation to assess, Carde asked, if the galaxy has torn itself apart by then we will do what we've always done, Covenant said. We will judge, we will purge, and we will endure. The Emperor may be dead, but the work of the Inquisition is eternal. But even as he spoke the words, Covenant wondered if he believed them. In the weeks that followed, the Inquisition's response mirrored the larger fracturing of imperial authority. Some Inquisitors increased their purges, hunting heretics with even greater fervor as if they could somehow restore order through sheer brutality. Others withdrew entirely, hoarding resources against the coming darkness. A few, like Carda, began building their own power bases, establishing fiefdoms in the chaos, and some simply vanished, their final fates unknown. Inquisitor Amberly Vale of the Ordo Xenos, operating near the Eastern Fringe, recorded this in her personal journal. I have spent my life fighting threats to the Imperium. I have stood against Tyranid hive fleets, Ork empires, Necron dynasties, and Tau expansions. I thought I understood the enemy, but I realize now that the greatest threat was always internal, our dependence on a single point of failure. Terra was the keystone, and when it fell, the arch collapsed. I don't know if I still believe in the Emperor. But I believe in the people I've fought beside. I believe humanity deserves a chance to survive, even if it means abandoning the Imperium's corpse and starting anew. Perhaps that's heresy. Perhaps I'll be judged for it, if any Inquisitors remain to judge. But in the end, what matters more, loyalty to a dead institution or the survival of our species? She never transmitted that entry. 3 weeks later, her ship was found drifting in the void, its crew dead, its systems dark. Whether she'd been assassinated by fellow Inquisitors, killed by xenos, or simply chose to end her own life was never determined. She was one of thousands who simply disappeared during those months. 3 months after the message, the truth began to emerge. It came in fragments, pieced together from scattered reports, from navigators who'd risked insanity to probe the warp near Sol, from astropaths who'd survived contact with the psychic echoes of Terra's death. The story, when assembled, was worse than anyone had imagined. It began with the Golden Throne. For 10,000 years, that ancient device had sustained the Emperor's withered form, keeping his psychic consciousness alive to power the Astronomicon and hold shut the webway gate beneath the palace. It required constant maintenance by the Adeptus Mechanicus, constant sacrifice of psychers to feed its hungry systems. But the Golden Throne was failing, not suddenly. Gradually, over centuries, the Mechanicus had known, the Inquisition had known, the High Lords of Terra had known. They'd kept it secret, fearing the panic that would result if the Imperium learned its foundation was crumbling. They'd searched for solutions, ancient technology, heretical innovations, anything that might repair or replace the throne. They'd found nothing that worked, and so they'd simply hoped. Hoped that something would change. Hoped that the Emperor would somehow heal himself. Hoped that they would find an answer before it was too late. They didn't. According to the fragmentary reports, the catastrophic failure occurred during a routine maintenance cycle. A cascade malfunction in the throne's power systems, perhaps triggered by warp fluctuations, perhaps simply the result of 10 millennia of accumulated damage. The Mechanicus tech priests tried to compensate. They diverted power from the palace's other systems. They sacrificed 100 psychers instead of the usual 1,000, feeding the throne desperately needed energy. It wasn't enough. The Golden Throne died. And when it died, the Emperor, sustained by its systems for 10,000 years, died with it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened to the Webway Gate. When the throne failed, the ancient seal Magnus the Red had broken during the Horus Heresy collapsed entirely. The gate, which opened directly into the warp, tore itself wide. Terra, humanity's cradle, the most heavily populated world in the galaxy, home to quadrillions of souls, suddenly found itself with a gaping wound into the immaterium at its heart. The daemons poured through, not dozens, not thousands, millions. Legions upon legions of chaos entities freed from the restraints that had held them at bay for 10 millennia. The Custodian Guard fought, the Sisters of Silence fought, the Imperial Fists, the garrison regiments, every warrior on Terra threw themselves at the daemon tide. They were overwhelmed in hours. Terra burned. The Hive Cities were torn apart from within as daemons erupted through every street, every building. Billions died in the first day, trillions in the first week. The solar system's defensive fleets tried to establish a quarantine to contain the horror to Terra itself. But how did you quarantine a warp breach? The Immaterium didn't obey physical laws. Daemons manifested on ships, on other worlds, anywhere there were human souls to corrupt. Mars fell to civil war as demonic corruption spread through the data streams. The forged temples became abattoirs. Luna, ancient Luna, humanity's first space colony, was consumed by a warp storm that materialized from nothing. The outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, went dark one by one as their stations and colonies were overrun or evacuated. In desperation, the solar system's defenders attempted to destroy Terra itself. Cyclonic torpedoes, virus bombs, every weapon of mass destruction they possessed was launched at humanity's birthworld. Most were intercepted by demonic forces. Those that struck did nothing. You couldn't kill a world that had already become a daemon-infested hellscape. In the end, the senior surviving commander, whoever that was, ordered a full retreat, ordered every ship that could still navigate to flee the Sol system. Some made it out, most didn't. And Terra, ancient Earth, cradle of humanity, throne world of the God Emperor, became something else entirely. It became a new eye of terror, a wound in reality centered on soul, expanding slowly but inexorably, turning the Imperium's heart into a realm of pure chaos. The psychic scream of Terra's death was the moment 10,000 years of sacrificed psychers, of accumulated human suffering, of desperate faith, all collapsed into warp stuff. Navigator Stellarius, who'd been one of the first to piece the truth together, reported his findings to Lord Admiral Vane with a voice that shook. "My lord, Terra still exists, in a sense, but it's become something we cannot approach. The warp storms around Sol are impenetrable, and what lies within?" He paused. The few navigators who've tried to look have gone mad. They speak of a burning eye, of a world where reality and the warp have merged completely, of the Emperor's corpse seated on a broken throne, animated by demonic entities, a puppet god ruling over a realm of nightmares. "Then it's truly gone," Vane said. "Yes, my lord. Terra is dead, and something far worse has taken its place." The implications were staggering. The core of the Imperium, not just Terra, but Sol, the entire solar system, the ancient heartland of human civilization, had been transformed into a chaos-infested zone. Hundreds of surrounding systems were already falling to warp storms or demonic incursion. The galaxy was being split, the great rift to the galactic north, and now this new eye of chaos at the center, dividing the Imperium into isolated fragments. And the Astronomicon, that great lighthouse, would never shine again. Even if another astropathic beacon could be established elsewhere, it would never have the power of the Emperor's psychic might. Human interstellar travel would become infinitely more dangerous, more difficult, more costly in time and lives. The Imperium, already vast and unwieldy, would become impossible to maintain as a unified entity. Within 6 months of Terra's fall, the Imperium had ceased to exist as a coherent political entity. In its place emerged hundreds of successor states, each claiming to be the true continuation of imperial authority. The realm of Ultramar, centered on Macragge, declared itself the legitimate heir to imperial governance. Chapter Master Calgar established a regency council and began consolidating control over the 500 worlds and beyond. Some systems joined willingly, grateful for ultramarine protection. Others were annexed by force. "We preserve what we can," Calgar told his assembled captains. "The Emperor's dream may be dead, but humanity need not die with it. Ultramar will endure, and perhaps in time, Ultramar will expand to encompass all that was lost." But expansion meant conquest, meant bringing other human worlds under ultramarine authority whether they wished it or not. The line between liberation and subjugation grew increasingly blurred. The Segmentum Pacificus Confederation formed when 17 sector governors banded together for mutual protection. They declared independence from both the High Lords of Terra, who no longer existed, and from Space Marine oversight. This was to be a purely human government, they claimed. No super soldiers, no Adeptus Astra telepathica interference, no Inquisition. It lasted 4 months before internal rivalries tore it apart. The Macarian Protectorate, named for the legendary Lord Solar Macarius, coalesced in the Segmentum Ultima under the leadership of General Kieran Atreus. He'd been a senior guard commander, a veteran of 50 campaigns. Now he claimed the right to rule based on military strength. The Imperium was always a military dictatorship, he told his officers. "We just pretended otherwise. Now the pretense is gone. I have the armies. I have the loyalty of my soldiers. I will bring order to this sector, with or without Imperial blessing." His forces conquered a dozen systems in as many weeks. Other guard regiments either joined him or were destroyed. The ecclesiarchal domain emerged on Ophelia the Sept and surrounding shrine worlds. Cardinal Commander Malavor, having consolidated his authority over the faithful who remained, declared himself the voice of the ascended emperor. He claimed direct divine revelation and began a series of brutal religious purges. "The emperor has transcended flesh," he preached. "He tests us now, separates the wheat from the chaff. Only the truly faithful will survive to greet him upon his return." Billions died in those purges. Anyone who questioned Malavor's authority was declared heretic and executed. The Free Leagues were a looser confederation of merchant worlds and minor systems that rejected all claims of higher authority. They established democratic governance, an almost heretical concept after 10 millennia of imperial autocracy. They traded freely with anyone, including xenos races. The Inquisition remnants labeled them traitors. They called themselves the future. The Mechanicus orthodoxy, based on Mars, attempted to maintain the old alliance with the Imperium, even though the Imperium no longer existed. Fabricator General Kelbor Hal the Younger declared that Mars would continue to supply any successor state that acknowledged Mechanicus sovereignty over all technology. Meanwhile, the reformist forges, led by Archmagos Kaul and centered on distant Sotha, rejected this approach. They declared independence and began sharing technology more freely, arguing that humanity's survival now depended on innovation rather than dogma. The split created a technological divide. Some regions benefited from reformist advances. Others clung to orthodoxy and saw their technical capabilities slowly decay. Reformist advances. Others clung to orthodoxy and saw their technical capabilities slowly decay. And these were just the major successor states. There were hundreds of minor ones, individual systems, groups of planets, even large void stations that declared independence and attempted to chart their own course. Some were relatively benign. Others were nightmarish tyrannies that made the Imperium's worst excesses look merciful by comparison. Lord Commander Militant Casimir, now styling himself merely Commander Casimir since there was no longer a unified military to command, recorded this assessment. The Imperium's greatest achievement was not conquest or technology or even survival against impossible odds. It was simply holding together, maintaining some semblance of unity across 1,000,000 worlds for 10,000 years. That was the miracle. Now the miracle is over. And we see what humanity becomes without the Emperor's unifying presence, without Terra's authority, without the shared purpose that bound us together. We become what we always were underneath, fractious, divided, endlessly warring among ourselves. The only difference is that now we do it openly rather than hiding it behind imperial rhetoric. But fragmentation created opportunities as well as disasters. The Cadian Confederation, formed by survivors of Cadia's fall and scattered Cadian regiments, established a mobile fleet-based civilization. They had no home world. Cadia was destroyed, so they made the void itself their home. They roamed between systems, offering military services, maintaining discipline, preserving Cadian martial culture, even as everything else burned. "We are soldiers without a nation," General Creed's successor proclaimed. "But we remain soldiers. We will fight, we will endure, and perhaps one day we will find a new Cadia. Or perhaps we will simply fade away, but we will do it standing, weapons in hand." The Phoenix Initiative, led by a coalition of progressive-minded governors and a few radical inquisitors, attempted something unprecedented. They reached out to xenos races to establish mutual defense pacts. It was heresy by imperial standards. But imperial standards no longer applied. They negotiated trade agreements with some Tau septs, non-aggression pacts with minor Eldar craft worlds, even coordinated defensive actions against Tyranid splinter fleets. Most of the Imperium's successor states denounced them. The Phoenix Initiative didn't care. They were too busy surviving. And then there were the dark sectors, regions that had fallen to chaos, to Ork empires, to Tyranid consumption, or simply to anarchy so complete that no organized authority could function. Hundreds of systems, billions of souls, lost to darkness. The galaxy became a patchwork of competing powers, shifting alliances, and isolated strongholds, surrounded by anarchic wilderness. The Necron overlord, Trazyn the Infinite, stood in his galleries on Solemnus and observed a new acquisition with great satisfaction. It was a fragment of the Golden Throne, recovered by one of his collecting expeditions shortly after Terra's fall. The broken mechanism still crackled with residual power, and imprisoned within its quantum matrices was something rare indeed, the psychic echo of the Emperor's final moments. "Fascinating," Trazyn murmured. "The fall of empires is always instructive. The humans lasted longer than I expected. 10,000 years is respectable for such a fractious species. But ultimately, all biological civilizations are transient. Only we endure." His attendant, a lesser Necron lord, inquired, "Shall we exploit their weakness, Overlord? The human worlds are vulnerable now." "Why bother?" Trazyn replied. "They're destroying each other quite efficiently without our intervention. Dehumi is broken." Ghazghkull roared to his assembled war bosses. "No more big boss on the gold chair. Now we takes what we wants." and they did. Dozens of systems fell to Ork conquest, adding to the expanding greenskin empires that now rivaled the largest human domains in size. The Eldar of the craft worlds watched the unfolding catastrophe with mixed emotions. Some Farseers saw humanity's fracture as a tragedy, a lessening of the galaxy's order, a weakening of the barriers against chaos. Others saw opportunity. For 10,000 years, the Mon-K dominated this galaxy. Farseer Eldrad Ulthran observed. They claimed dominion over millions of worlds that once were ours. Now they retreat, fracture, collapse. Perhaps this is our chance to reclaim what was lost, but Craftworld Ulthwee's seers knew better. They saw through the skein of fate that humanity's fall would drag the entire galaxy down with it. The warp storms were growing worse. Chaos was expanding. The dark gods fed on human suffering, and there was suffering now on an unprecedented scale. "We are all doomed," one seer whispered. "The great enemy grows fat on human despair. Soon it will consume us all, human, Eldar, even the lesser races. This is the beginning of the final age." The Tau Empire, ever pragmatic, saw humanity's fracture as validation of their philosophy. "The greater good cannot rest on a single point of failure," Commander Farsight mused. "The human empire fell because it was too centralized, too dependent on one world, one being. We are wiser. The Tauva is distributed, resilient, adaptable." The Tau began aggressive expansion into former Imperial space, offering protection to human worlds in exchange for submission to the greater good. Some humans accepted, preferring Tau rule to anarchy. Others fought viciously, seeing the Tau as xenos invaders no better than Orks. The Tau found themselves fighting simultaneous wars on 100 fronts. Their empire, which had been so carefully managed, began to strain under the pressure of rapid expansion. Even they, it seemed, were not immune to the chaos consuming the galaxy. 1 year after Terra's fall, the crisis reached its crescendo. The various human successor states had stabilized to some degree, establishing borders, building defensive networks, attempting to maintain some semblance of civilization. But they were surrounded by hostile forces on all sides, and the warp storms made communication and coordination nearly impossible. It was then that the worst possible scenario unfolded. Abaddon the Despoiler, Warmaster of Chaos, launched the largest Black Crusade in history. He'd been planning it for years, gathering forces, positioning fleets, making pacts with daemon princes and renegade chapters. But he'd been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Terra's fall was that moment. With the Eye of Terror to the north and the new Eye of Chaos at the galaxy's center, Abaddon had two massive warp rifts from which to launch his invasion. His forces emerged simultaneously from both, a coordinated assault of staggering scale. 50,000 Chaos Space Marines, 1 million traitor guardsmen, daemon legions beyond counting, and supporting them, fleets of corrupted warships that had once served the Imperium. The Warmaster's target was not conquest, it was annihilation. He sought to finish what Horus had started 10,000 years ago, the complete destruction of the Emperor's legacy. The human successor states, weakened and divided, struggled to respond. The realm of Ultramar called for unity, for the various factions to put aside their differences and face the common enemy. Some answered the call. Many did not, too wrapped up in their own survival, too distrustful of ultramarine authority, or simply unable to navigate the warp storms to reach the battle zones. The Space Marine chapters that remained loyal to Imperial ideals gathered their strength. The Black Templars launched a counter-crusade. The Salamanders deployed to protect civilian populations. The Blood Angels, Black Rage temporarily held at bay by shared purpose, threw themselves into battle with renewed fervor. But they were scattered, uncoordinated, lacking the strategic unity that had once made the Astartes so formidable. On the world of Kalth, Commander Casimir assembled what he called the Last Army, a coalition force drawn from loyalist guard regiments, PDF forces, and civilian volunteers. 30 million soldiers, drawn from 100 different worlds, speaking dozens of languages, united only by the knowledge that if they fell here, there would be nowhere left to retreat to. "We are not fighting for the Imperium," Casimir told his assembled commanders. "The Imperium is dead. We are fighting for each other, for our families, for the simple right to exist in a galaxy that seems determined to extinguish us." "Will it be enough?" asked General Morven, still at his side after all these months. Probably not, Casimir admitted. But we fight anyway, because that's what we do. That's what we've always done. We face impossible odds, and we fight anyway. The Battle of Calth lasted for 3 months. The last army held against waves of chaos cultists, against traitor marines, against demonic incursions. They held through orbital bombardment, through psychic assaults that drove men mad, through plagues that liquefied flesh, and corruption that turned loyal soldiers into screaming abominations. They held because there was nowhere left to run. And across the galaxy, similar battles raged. On 1,000 worlds, in the void between stars, in the Imperium itself, humanity fought for its survival. Some battles were won, many were lost. The realm of Ultramar held, barely, after Abaddon's forces breached the outer defense sphere and threatened Macragge itself. The combined might of 13 Space Marine chapters, supported by what remained of Battlefleet Ultima, managed to drive the Chaos Fleet back, though at terrible cost. The Cadian Confederation, fighting a running battle across the Agrippina sector, lost half its fleet but managed to evacuate 17 billion civilians from war zones. The ecclesiarchal domain fell entirely, consumed by demonic incursion. Cardinal Commander Malavor died screaming as his own zealots tore him apart, convinced he was a daemon in disguise. The Free Leagues fractured under the pressure, some systems negotiating separate peace with chaos forces, others fighting to the last human. And through it all, the question remained, could humanity survive, not as the Imperium, that was clearly impossible, but as a species, as a collection of scattered civilizations clinging to life in a hostile galaxy? The answer came not from victory in battle, but from something quieter. 2 years after Terra fell, on a world called Meridian in the Segmentum Ultima, representatives from 17 human factions gathered for what would later be called the Meridian Conclave. They came from successor states, from independent worlds, from fleet-based civilizations and underground resistance movements. They came because Commander Casimir had sent out a message, transmitted through every astropathic relay still functioning. We can continue to fracture, to fight among ourselves while the galaxy devours us, or we can acknowledge what we've become and work together anyway. The conclave met in an ancient amphitheater, open to Meridian's twin suns. No guards were, and slowly, grudgingly, a consensus emerged, not around a single solution, but around a shared understanding. Humanity could not be reunited. The galaxy was too large, the warp storms too severe, the ideological differences too great. There would be no new Imperium, no single authority to replace what was lost. But humanity could coexist. The various factions could establish protocols for cooperation, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts. They could maintain some form of communication, some sense of shared identity. They could survive as a diaspora rather than an empire. The Emperor's dream was unity, Calgar said on the final day of the conclave. Perhaps that dream was always impossible. Perhaps we are better suited to diversity, to competing visions of what humanity should be. But we can still share one thing, the commitment to ensure humanity has a future, whatever form that future takes. The Meridian Accords were signed by 11 of the 17 factions present. It wasn't universal, it wasn't perfect, but it was something. A framework for communication, an agreement not to war upon each other except in self-defense, a commitment to share information about xenos threats and chaos incursions. It was fragile. Many predicted it would collapse within months, but it held. Because the alternative was extinction, astropath transcendent Marius Kell, who had lived long past a normal human lifespan through a combination of augmentation, will, and sheer spite, stood in the ruins of Vigilance Eternal and composed his final message. 200 years had passed since Terra's fall. He'd watched the Imperium die, watched humanity fracture, watched the galaxy transform into something alien and hostile. But he'd also watched humanity adapt. The successor states had evolved into mature civilizations. Some remained quasi-imperial in character, the realm of Ultramar, the Phoenician Federation. Others had transformed into something entirely new. Democracies, merchant republics, theocracies both enlightened and oppressive. Humanity was no longer one species in some ways. Populations cut off from each other for centuries had begun to diverge. Different technologies, different cultures, different solutions to survival. But they endured. The Meridian Accords held, barely. Trade routes had been re-established using short-range warp jumps and dead reckoning. Astropathic networks maintained communication between some regions. Wars still erupted between human factions, but they were generally limited, controlled, fought with some recognition that extinction loomed if they went